Hi, thank you so much for joining. My name is Yolanda Gardner, and I am the founder and the principal consultant of YGM Consulting and Mind and Money Solutions. Today, we're going to have a conversation about where you find yourself on the K curve today, how to get yourself on the right side of the K curve, what the K curve even is, and how you can establish a 90-day plan to put yourself in a position to be a winner on this side of things. So, the title of this presentation is called Moving to the Growing Side of the K-Curve: How to Build Financial Resilience, Economic Income Power, and Ownership. So today, I want you to understand that you are not behind. You are building, okay? Especially if you're a first generation wealth builder, I want you to be very graceful towards yourself and understanding that you are starting from a position of power. You're not disempowered. You're just having to start building a foundation in order to start building something on that foundation, right? And so what I don't want you to do in this moment is allow those negative emotions of shame, guilt, anything that you've done in the past that you feel like has positioned you to be in the financial position that you're in today, let that all go today. We're just here. This is a judgment-free zone. We're rooted in real numbers. We're going to be culturally grounded, faith-informed, practical. And this presentation is built for action, not for shame, and mainly is built for education. So I want you to understand that you are not getting any type of financial advice here, or legal advice. This is strictly for financial education and informational purposes only. Feel free to always reach out to me at Yolanda at yolandagconsulting.com to be able to, get specific questions answered or to be able to get additional support. We're definitely here to help you, but you will leave here with a plan and a framework for how you choose to move forward. So today we're going to cover what a K-shaped economy is. You will understand the divide and which side you are actually building on. You are going to understand how to move through three different stages, which are survival, stability, sustainability. We're going to talk about the three pillars of being in the economy, which is financial resilience, income power, and ownership. We're also going to talk about pre-retirement readiness, which is what matters most in the decade that you're in today. And then you are going to leave with a 90-day plan, which is going to be a written personal roadmap for you to implement and take action after this is over. So what is a K-shaped economy? Picture the letter K, right? And so one line is going up and one line is falling down. Okay. They both start from the same point, but they move in completely opposite directions. So since 2020, the US economy has increasingly moved in this way, where asset owners, investors, and high earners are increasing their wealth, while people who are workers, renters, and those carrying significant debt are finding themselves on the declining side of the K-shaped curve. So what I want you to understand here is whether you find yourself on the top or the bottom, you have to understand that there are actions to take to move up either one to get to the other side, right? Or to continue to move up the curve. And this is not something that's personal. This is structural, this is systemic. And understanding where it fits in your situation today helps you position yourself differently and take different actions. So as we think about the two sides of the K economy, okay, you have the declining side, which is tied to one paycheck. Your debt is growing faster than your savings. There is no cushion for emergencies. You're renting with no equity path, and you're reactive and in survival mode versus being able to be proactive and preparing for the future, right? And on the growing side, you have multiple streams of income, assets that appreciate over time. And when you think about assets, that's going to be, a business. It can be home ownership. It can be a side hustle. It can be your investments. Assets are not just one class of things. There are many different ways to build assets, but assets are to appreciate over time. You have 3 to 6 months saved. And so if that's you, then you're on the K side. I mean, the upside of the K curve. You have ownership. So that's going to be home, business, investments, right? And then you are proactive in your decision making and you are planning your decisions versus making your decisions out of crisis, right? Out of confusion. You have a plan for what your money is supposed to do for you. So why does this all matter? Black women in pre-retirement. Okay, at this point, median wealth for single Black women is often cited near zero, which we know that's not the case for everyone, right? But when you think about our counterparts and the access to their wealth, Black women fall on that lower side of what wealth they have accumulated up until this point. And that wealth gap continues to widen. Why? Because of systemic things at play, the economy, layoffs, being in that sandwich generation where you are taking care of not only yourself, but the generation that you brought forth and the generation that brought you forth, right? And so there may be multi-generational types of responsibilities that people have. And then, when we think about retirement, when you think about the years before retirement, the highest leverage is going to be 10 years before retirement. That allows you for catch-up contributions, income growth, and asset building. So each year, when you think about contributions, that's going to be related to your 401k, 403b, 457, Roth IRA, traditional IRA. But basically, there are different provisions that are in place to help you do catch-ups. And so that number does increase every year. So as you're thinking about approaching retirement, once you get to 50, you can start to contribute a little bit more to your retirement to try to close the gap as you are in a position to retire in the next 15 to 20 years. So there are ways to actually catch up when you get to the point where you are 50 years old. And so that is a really key point to point out because people actually feel as if they do not have the opportunity to close that gap as they get older. But in reality, you really do. It's just a matter of approaching it with the right plan and strategy versus ignoring it, right? And then, of course, we have the earning gap where Black women have historically earned roughly 64 cents as opposed to every dollar that a white man earns, right? And so this compounds into the wealth gap. And until these things systemically are closed, it prevents Black women from being able to fully explore all of what they are able to do with their wealth. So if you're thinking about 64 cents to the dollar, that's home ownership, that's investments that are not growing at the same rate. That's assets that are not being able to grow at the same rate. That's businesses that aren't able to be, bootstrapped and funded in the same way because if you're a 9 to 5 employee, that income gap starts to spill over into your future. So as we think about the journey, right? Moving towards the growing side of the K, right? That top part, it happens in stages. It doesn't happen overnight. So each stage, it builds the floor for the next stage. So the very first thing that, we want to move from is survival, and that's reacting to what's urgent, right? Living to paycheck to paycheck and your debt driving your decisions. So right now, to use an example, a lot of people are starting to see student loans impact and, be a monkey on their back when it comes to how they're able to grow their wealth. Well, the problem is with everything else rising, the cost of housing, the cost of food, the cost of gas, electricity, utilities, everything's rising right now. And so people who may have found themselves in stable positions are slowly sliding back into this survival mode. So it's causing you to not be able to make the best decisions because you're reacting to what's directly in front of you versus being able to plan for the future, right? So once you get out of survival mode, and we will talk about how to actually do that, you move into a place of stability where you have a plan. Bills are predictable, your expenses are predictable, and you have a cushion for what you are trying to build. And from there, you go into a sustainability plan where your habits are on autopilot. Your habits being, you have your bills on auto pay. You know that you're going to have your savings funded. You know that your investments are going to be funded, right? You're going to see that your assets are growing. You're going to see your ownership compounding. And that's because these things are ingrained into your financial planning where you know you're working towards something and you're starting to actually see those things starting to build over time. And so this is what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. So what does survival mode look like? All right. Survival mode is living paycheck to paycheck. That's regardless of income. There are people who make $300,000, $400,000 who live paycheck to paycheck. Why? Because they don't actually have a sustainable plan in place for their money. You're using credit to cover the gaps between paydays. So anytime you're having to use credit to cover your gaps, where you're not able to actually pay that debt back immediately each month, then you find yourself in survival mode. No emergency savings, or your savings are getting drained because you have to keep pulling from it. This happens quite frequently. Like again, over 500,000, almost 600,000 Black women were pushed out of the workforce over the last 2 years. And what we're finding is people are starting to have to pull from their savings to be able to sustain their everyday lives because it's taking them longer to actually go back into the workforce. That is not a failure on their end, right? It's not a character flaw on their end. It's just that they are in a position where they now have to they have to refocus on actually surviving and dealing with today. Financial decisions are made under stress and in the moment. So instead of you having a plan for your money, emergencies come up and you are immediately attacking it without a clear plan of how that translates into your future plan, that is survival mode, right? And then avoiding your bank account balance and mail from creditors. Again, this is something that you can't ignore. The first thing in even moving up the curve is really to have awareness around what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so if you're avoiding bank account balances and you're avoiding creditors, that's going to be something that you have to start to address. Now, oftentimes, if you find yourself in a position where you don't have what you need to be able to cover things like credit related, you can always call and ask for hardship programs, and oftentimes they will help you. But there are a lot of different ways to address and options to address, that financial instability while you're in survival mode. With creditors, you just have to open your mouth and ask. You have to be willing to ask the questions. And so when you're thinking about survival mode, I want you to understand that this is not a character flaw. It's often a result of unpaid work, caregiving without support, and systems, right? Built on a different starting line. And when we think about systems, you think about equity, right? We had a lot of just equity provisions and protections rolled back over the last 2 years that are really starting to impact you or people you may know. You may be having to provide additional support to people that you weren't providing support to before, like family members. And so these things really put you at a different starting point because you have different priorities, right? And so the only way that you actually clear the air when it comes to survival mode and starting to move up that K curve, right, is to name it without shame so that it makes it possible to move out of it. There is no way for you to actually move up and down, up the curve, right, and start to grow your wealth if you're not willing to name what you are experiencing right now. And if that's you, that's fine. But we do not want to keep you there. And so once we get to the point where you are starting to do the things to get you out of survival mode, you want to name the number. Okay. So you want to write down every debt, write down every bill, and write down each income source. No number is too big or too small or too embarrassing. One of the things I hear all the time is, I eat out too much. Oh my gosh, listen, you got to eat. But there are different ways for you to actually control that part of your budget. But you have to actually look to see what you are doing with your money in order to actually understand how to approach your money on a monthly basis, right? So the next thing you have to do once you actually identify and name the number is you got to stop the bleeding. What is that one recurring cost that is causing the most damage? Is it high interest debt? Is it overdrafts? Is it, late fees? Is it subscriptions that you don't use? Start to assess what those things are so then you can start to kind of plug the holes in your boat so that your money is not leaking as much. Okay. And then build a $500 buffer. So as you move out of survival mode, build that buffer. So what you can start doing is paying yourself first to build yourself that buffer. If you have to call your bill collectors and just say, financial hardship, can I get a couple months of forbearance, or can I get a 0% interest for 6 months? Whatever that looks like, put yourself first and start to build that 500 buffer, because the $500 buffer, because at the end of the day, if you build that buffer, that can help you to address things quicker without using debt. And it actually can break the cycle of you using debt when things become unexpected. Okay. And then tell someone, right? Talk to someone. Isolation is the thing that keeps people in survival mode. When you feel like you are dealing with this on your own, oftentimes, again, that's where those emotions come in of shame and guilt and, feeling like you're overwhelmed and overburdened with your money. But talk to someone that can help you develop accountability and really help you to understand, again, what is your plan and how are we going to, keep you accountable to get there. And it'll really get you in a position where you're actually able to start to see things accelerate a little bit faster. Trust me. So this next stage is building that foundation. So stability is going to be the plans that run the household, not in the moment of crisis. So one of the things that I heard last year or earlier this year was people make decisions from choice, from crisis, or from a place of chaos, right? When you are building your foundation, you allow yourself to make the best decisions for yourself based on choice. And when you give yourself the opportunity to make the decisions based on choice, what that does for you is help you to think, right? It helps you to create predictability. And when you can create predictability, it helps you align your habits with what you're doing, right? Because if you put your money, say, towards your account that is for investments, then you know for a fact that, okay, this money is going there. That's predictable. Those investments are supposed to grow. That's predictable, right? But if you are doing you don't know what to do with your money, you can't possibly create a predictable spending plan. You should also be able to know where your money is going, how much you should have left over after each month, if you have anything left over. Once you start to build that foundation, you'll want to start saving 1 month of expenses. And so the goal over time is to save 3 to 6 months, right? But as you think about that, you'll want to first start to save 1 month of your expenses. And that can be over time. These things are not for you to go and do in a month, okay? But you do want to start to build your sustainability habits to be able to actually get you to a month, and then work towards 2 months, and then work towards 3 months, right? Until you get to that 6 month time frame. It may take you 2 years, it may take you 3 years, but the goal, right, is to get there. Also paying off high interest debt on a payoff plan. So not just paying the minimums, but actually have a target date. If you go to my website, you will find a resource that has an actual debt payoff calculator where you're in the position, to be able to put your debts in there and be able to actually figure out what your target date for your payoff is. What that helps you do is, again, establish those sustainable habits to actually get you there versus putting you in the position where you're just guessing each month. You can do an avalanche where you pay off the highest interest first. You can do the snowball where you pay off the lowest balance. It really just depends on what fits in your budget at the time. And then when you are in stability, you are, putting your bills on auto pay, or you have a fixed calendar where you know when your bills are coming out, and your auto pay really is in a position where you don't have to think about it. The more you don't have to think about your money, the more your money can do for you, right? Because again, it takes the emotions out of the money. You don't have any late fees. And so you really are positioning yourself to be stable, because these things, again, are predictable. So when you're thinking about your checking account, one of the things I recommend is having a checking account for your operating household, right? Your household operating account, which covers all your base bills, and then having an emergency fund. having a fund for regular expenses. So that's going to be car repairs, car registration, gifts, holidays, and then your opportunity account, which could be your seed money for income growth. That can be, where you are putting money away for a certification, you're putting money away for, um, you know, investing in something that can give you a good return, including the stock market. A lot of different ways to do this. It's just a matter of actually having that buffer. Okay. So with the sustainability, with stability, the habits that actually make this stick are going to be weekly money check-ins. So if you have been someone who has not addressed your money on a regular basis, you'll want to set aside 15 minutes each week on the same day, and actually review your spending, your upcoming bills, and your savings progress. What that'll allow you to do is be able to actually understand what's going on with your money on a weekly basis, right? Versus waiting and trying to approach it over an entire month. And so what that does for you is it brings you closer to what's happening on a recurring basis versus you trying to figure that out all at one time. So then having a monthly reset plan. So rebuild the spending plan each month around real numbers and not guesses. This is going to be huge because it allows you to reallocate and adjust as needed versus again waiting until things get to a point where they are just too big to handle, right? And then watching your debt to income. So you want to track that debt to income ratio, not just the balances. So it tells you if you're gaining ground by watching that debt go down, right? So you always want to be seeing your debt decreasing and your savings increasing. If that is what you're seeing on a monthly basis, then you're in the stability. You're in that stage of stability. And then having an accountability circle, right? Where a person who is going to be checking on you on the plan, not just venting. So we all have experienced some level of financial instability and it's frustrating. However, if you position yourself to have accountability people around you that just encourage you, that help you jumpstart and navigate when you need to, then that helps you to continue to reach your goals no matter where you are in your financial situation. So when we think about sustainability, that's like on that growing side, right? That top part of the K. This is where your habits quietly start to build for you, okay? And your money starts working for you versus against you. So this is where your assets are going to grow automatically. And when I tell you, when you start seeing your assets grow, it is one of those things where if you are not a numbers person, it looks like magic, right? But when you think about compounding, you're thinking about retirement investments, equity building, money is supposed to grow when you are putting money away. And it allows you to do that without having to make daily decisions around that money, right? So when you're investing and your assets are growing automatically, that is a direct reflection of your your stability habits starting to show you that it's coming. So you have income from more than one source. So there's a blend of wages, ownership, and business income. So you are not relying on just one source of income, and you are putting yourself in a position to actually, weather some storms if you need to be able to. So you're not dependent on one job, you're not dependent on one thing. You are really positioning yourself to actually start to thrive and grow your money from more than one income source. And so ownership replaces renting. Now, renting is not always going to be the best thing for everyone. I really want to help people understand that sometimes like home ownership versus renting makes sense depending on where you are, where you live. And so when you find yourself in a position where you are starting to want to build ownership. Ownership may look like business equity and investment equity over home ownership, right? Home ownership is one of those things that, while yes, it is a great way to build wealth, it also it requires a lot of maintenance. You have to really find yourself in a good, financial situation to be able to handle repairs and all the things that are associated with home ownership. So there are other ways to build ownership that are not just home ownership, right? Again, you can do equity, you can do investment equity, business equity, those types of things, instead of just pure consumption. So you're actually letting your money go to work for you. And then sustainability is when you get to the point of your 3 to 6 month fund being funded. And this is that true resilience where you're able to absorb any type of economic factors without derailing the plan, right? It gives you time to pivot. It gives you time to think. It gives you time to recalibrate so that you're not making decisions from a place of desperation. You're able to continue with your plan. You know what the plan is. So then you can just plug and play from there. So when you think about the things that position you to even start to get to a good point, you always want to think about financial resilience. And so the term financial resilience is the ability to absorb a financial shock, whether it is job loss, medical bill, car repair, all of those things that we deal with, right? On a every year things pop up. And these things can happen without erasing years of progress. So financial resilience looks like an emergency fund that actually is for your real life. Okay. So not just the generic, okay, say $10,000, but does that $10,000 cover for 3 to 6 months of your expenses? And if not, then you want to start building that. Okay. That helps you build that financial resilience. Does your insurance cover the risk of income disruption? So when you think about insurance, a lot of people, especially right now, health insurance is a huge factor. Health insurance is a huge bill, especially with some of the subsidies that have gone away because of affordable healthcare changes. But when you think about covering your risk, you want to have health insurance, you want to have disability insurance, and most importantly, you want to have life insurance, especially if you have people who depend on your income. And when you think about people who depend on your income, that's going to be dependents, that's going to be, special needs family members, if you take care of them, if you're a caregiver, that's going to be a spouse, right? And so life insurance is one of the surefire ways for your family to not have to deal with what happens when you are not prepared. And that helps them to be more financially resilient if they depend on your income. Okay. Disability insurance, the same thing. If for whatever reason you have to be out of work, having that disability insurance can make sure that your income is not completely disrupted if you have to address any medical needs or any disability that keeps you from being able to work. Financial resilience also means that that is managed and not declining. And so it's not just that minimum paid payments. Your debt is declining. You can see those numbers going down. You can see where your debt is literally starting to be attacked. And that is financial resilience. And if you know, again, use the resource on my website where it is a debt calculator so that you can figure out how to break things down, how much extra money you can put towards debt. That helps you to create financial resilience. And then a support network that you can call on before an emergency. So your support network, it looks very different for everybody, but if you have that, then that helps you have financial resilience. And so as you think about resiliency, this is a check to see if you have financial resilience right now. All right. Can you cover a $500 surprise without a credit card today? Do you know your monthly must pay numbers? I call this the baseline, where do you understand how much money actually goes out of your household each month that you know has to be spent? So for instance, if you are in a position where it's you and a family member or two other family members and y'all spend $3,500 a month, that means you have to have $3,500 a month coming in from all of your resources, whether it is, like I said, your 9 to 5, a business, a part-time job, a gig. You know that your number needs to be $3,500. And so if there is any gap, you need to be working on covering that gap, right? Because income and money that needs to be covering your expenses, the expenses are not going to stop. So you need to make sure that your income and all of the money you're generating is able to cover your base monthly expenses. Also, as a resilience check, if your income stopped tomorrow, how many weeks could you cover your income or your expenses? Okay. And so if it's 1 week, 2 weeks, if it's tomorrow, then you know that you have to work on that financial resiliency. And then is your insurance coverage current and adequate? Insurance, life insurance, health insurance, disability, critical illness, accident insurance, all of those things, car insurance, they make a difference if you let it. Okay. So you need to make sure that those coverages are in place, and that you are covering your bases when it comes to being able to set yourself up to be financially resilient. So, how do you actually start building resilience if you are, just starting? So, number one, automate a small fixed amount. It can literally be $25 into a separate account that builds that habit before the amount matters. So, what you're doing is just building that muscle, right? When you first start a fitness journey, or when you start any type of journey where habits matter, you always have to start small before you can get those big muscles, right? Before you can see that true transformation. So, if it's something that you are not able to work on, start with something small. Right size your insurance. Make sure that if there is any insurance gaps, make sure they're addressed sooner rather than later. So I would recommend, talking to an insurance agent, making sure that you have the proper insurances that cover your life. Just because your cousin has a whole life policy and an IUL, that might not be the thing that you need. So you need to be talking to really good insurance providers, and to make sure that you have the right insurances in place so that you do not have to run through your savings if you run into a situation where you have to cover your expenses through one of these insurances. Um, Resilience starts with attacking one debt with intention. So again, it could be a highest interest, it could be a smallest balance, but you will want to target it so that you can focus on getting that debt down. When you think about the snowball method, which is starting from your smallest balance, that creates a level of momentum that then you can just start to roll, right? And again, if you're starting small, it helps you to build up to those bigger interests, those bigger balances or those higher interests, right? And then build your call list before you need it. So this is going to be your team of people who you know who to identify in case you need to get to support. So that's going to be for legal, medical, financial, and emotional before crisis hits. And let me tell you something. And when you think about, these things, if you have somebody on your legal team, medical, financial, emotional, you have these things in place, it's easy to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm dealing with this problem. I need assistance, right? I need your expertise. Versus if you have to start trying to scramble, you're going to get on Instagram, you're going to get on TikTok, you're going to get on the internet, and that may not be the right person to help you in a time of crisis. But then, sometimes you may not even know that until it's later on down the road. So you really want to make sure that you're building up your team in order to be able to find these experts in place if something hits, a crisis hits, and you can just press play and get the support that you need. So pillar two, when you're thinking about moving to the growing side of the cake, you want to think about your income power. So income is a part of your wealth building journey, but it is the fuel to your wealth building journey, right? And so your ability to increase your income, diversify your income, and protect what you earn is going to be so key to making sure that your household is not one paycheck away from the declining side of the K curve. A lot of people might be finding themselves in a position right now where they don't know what to do because they maybe never had to struggle before, right? They maybe never had a situation where they don't know where their next paycheck is coming from. But when you have multiple diversified sources of income and your income is protected, it allows for you to be able to continue to sustain, right? Or at least get to a point of stability without huge disruption. So knowing and negotiating your market value, not just accepting the first offer. So you, as a Black woman, you need to make sure that you are negotiating your salary. Do not take the first answer. And if they tell you no, create a plan and ask them, how do I find myself in a position where I can increase my income? Always be increasing your income. Do not ever get complacent, because bills don't get complacent, okay? It allows you to be able to build quickly. It allows you to be able to address your financial security first, and your expertise should be paid at a market rate that makes sense. You don't want to, get into a situation where you're not being compensated for your skill set. Because over time, that does start to pair off into how you show up. And we all know what that is. So then building skills that compound your earning potential over time. Never stop learning, you know. Right now there's a huge opportunity with a lot of different places. You can use Udemy, you can use LinkedIn, where you can keep building on your skill set. You can go to your local women's business centers. You can go to your local community college and invest in skills that will allow your earning to continue to grow over time. Never stop learning because number one, your brain is made to learn, right? But number two, if you can build those skills that help you to build your income, well, that's pretty much the point of things, right? Um, Create at least one income stream beyond your primary job. Oh my God, I cannot express this enough. Um, with the way, Black women have experienced being laid off over the last 2 years and then struggling to find employment, one of the things that has saved people, including myself, is having multiple sources of income, right? Where at least I know that there's something coming in and I have a small gap to close versus having to close a huge gap, right? And so then that helps you, if save for rainy days. It helps you to be in a position where you are not having to, it gives you a little bit more time. You're not having to completely drain your savings because you do have something coming in beyond your primary job. And so consider what that looks like for you, whether it's a part-time job, whether it's coaching, consulting, gigs, there are so many different ways to make more money outside of your primary job. Don't set yourself up for failure by thinking that one job is enough or one paycheck is enough. And then protect your income. I cannot express this enough. Benefits, if you work a 9 to 5 job, enroll in those benefits. And a lot of times, if you were to lose that job, a lot of those benefits are what is called portable, which means you can take them with you. If you're a business owner, contracts is your friend, okay? Or are your friend. Contracts are your friend. Protect your income through contracts, okay? And then healthy boundaries. So that means that you're not spending money on anybody and anything. You are being, wise in your decision making. People need to be able to see that and understand what that looks like. Um, Income power matters mostly because cutting expenses has a floor. You can only cut so much, but income does not have a ceiling. So you are building your income power to lever yourself on that growing side of the K curve, so to be able to really leverage, right, those years before retirement. Because keep in mind, once you get to retirement, you're no longer in the earning upward project trajectory. You are now at a fixed income state, right? If you don't have outside sources to continue to fund your lifestyle after retirement. So you really have to start thinking about what that looks like for you so that you can actually enjoy your retirement and not be in a position where you can't retire or enjoy retirement. So, in order to be able to grow your income power, know your numbers. Always do market research for a role that you are looking to negotiate or your job search because it's going to beat that guessing, right? So don't guess. Do your research. Negotiate on a schedule. So every time you get a review, ask for a raise. Okay, even if the answer is no, it keeps you visible and well informed. And if you ever get a no, always ask for a path, right, to being able to increase your income and document it. Okay. Pick one skill to sharpen. So, it could be, I just saw somebody release an app this week for women who love to read, and it's called Pages. And, you know, people were flocking to that app because there are a lot of people who love to read. But she was a software developer, so she took that skill that she had and learned how to build an app to be able to provide a service to women. And it's also going to open a new path for income. Doesn't have to be technical. It can literally be doing workshops. It can be, um, selling your skill set at a higher rate than what you're able to get paid for at your job. Whatever it is, pick one, sharpen that skill, go deeper, not wider. And then test one stream of income. So start scale, consulting, small service, or selling a skill. Start small and treat it as a real experiment and charge for it from the beginning. Don't think just because you haven't been doing it as a business that your expertise is not valued. Charge the rate that you should be charging. Um, and you will find yourself being able to actually protect yourself in the long run. And it helps when you are, trying to figure out how to price services later on and you start to increase the services that you are providing. You can really have a good understanding of where your floor was so that you can understand how to grow your business. But if you start consulting or anything for free, I promise you every single time it's going to hold you back. I promise you. So test test that income stream, but like actually test it and charge for it. Don't devalue yourself. All right, so the third pillar that we're considering is ownership. Okay, so ownership is going to be that shift from paying for the use of something to holding something that can appreciate, produce income, or be passed on. So you're thinking about your retirement accounts, fund those consistently. You're thinking about home equity or a clear path towards home equity. So that is going to be through home ownership. You think about investments outside of retirement accounts. So even if it's small, consistent amounts, that matters and it grows over time. I cannot, I could tell you stories about investing and how, it has really changed the lives of so many people. I had a former peer who was employee peer who was able to retire like 2 years early because they started investing with more of a intentional way, and they were able to retire right as COVID was starting to build up. And then have a will, beneficiaries, and documentation. This is where the attorney comes in. Sometimes you need a will, sometimes you need a trust, but you need someone who is going to be on your team as far as that legal person to be able to help you understand what type of things you need to protect your wealth that you're building for after you leave. So being a consumer versus an owner, consumer dollars, they buy something that loses value the moment that it's used, i.e. cars, right? And an owner, their dollars, when they spend them, that money grows, it produces income, and is transferable to the next generation. So again, you're thinking about businesses, you're thinking about art, collectibles, investments, home ownership is one of them, but that's what ownership does for you. It allows you to grow, produce income, and transfer it to the next generation. Every single pillar is designed to shift more of your dollars from the first category to the second category. So if you think about where we started with the first pillar, which is financial resilience, right? Once you get to that financial resilience, you're able to find yourself in a position where you are going to, increase that income power, right? And then once you increase your income power, that's how you get to the point where you're creating ownership and being able to actually see your money grow for you. So some practical steps towards ownership are capture that full employer match if you are if you have a 401k available to you. That's free money. Don't leave it on the table. I don't care what anybody says. Contribute to your 401k, okay? To that full employer match and some more, okay? Automate starting with a small investment. So start automating again, just like savings. You want to build that muscle up, and you're going to want to put yourself in a position where you are saving money and you're starting small. Over time, you're going to see it increase and you're going to start to want to put more money away, but start small. Get a real picture of home equity options. So whether buying, refinancing, or building equity, understand what your home value is, what your equity is, and then explore options on what you can actually do with your equity if you have a home. And then put your documents in order. Get your estate plan done. If you have not gotten your estate plan done, get it done. Talk to an attorney. Oftentimes, if you work a 9 to 5 job, they have a legal benefit for you. Use it, okay? You don't want to position yourself where you've done all of these really big things with your money, and then when you pass away, nobody knows what you're supposed to be doing with it. So the estate planning, will, beneficiaries, power of attorneys, a trust if needed, they all protect what you're actually building in the long run. So some things that you'll want to consider when you're thinking about yourself being pre-retirement. So that's 5 to 10 years outside of retirement. You want to make this your impact time frame. Okay. So if you are, 5 to 10 years out or, close to retirement, you'll want to think about pulling your Social Security estimate. I know they say Social Security is not going to be here, but figure out what your number is going to be, okay? Because again, that will help you understand, do I need 6 million? Do I need 2 million? Do I need 1 million? Do I need 250,000? Okay? Pull your Social Security statement. And as I said before, go back to what your baseline number is. What does that number look like for you? If you only need $3,500 a month for your household, and your Social Security is $3,000, that's only a $500 gap that you have to fill. Okay. So then that takes the pressure off, but you have a number to work for. Okay. So pull that Social Security statement, and you can just go to ssa.gov to be able to pull that Social Security statement. Set aside about 30 minutes to get that done, because sometimes when you're logging in, it can be a little bit frustrating to get it done. Okay. Um, Activate your catch-up contributions. So if you're at 50 or older, there's an increased amount that you can actually contribute that are called catch-up contributions that you are able to put towards your 401k or for your retirement. Use them if you need to. So if we go back to the Social Security statement, pull your Social Security and, you know, basically figure out what is a good, are you retiring at 62? If you retire at 62, you got to fund your insurance for 3 years. Okay. So if you retire at 65, cool. How much money will you need at that point in time? And then how much do you have to then fund, right? And if you need to do the catch-up provisions or the catch-up contributions, you can do that. Plan for healthcare, okay? Before your eligibility kicks in, plan for any gap that you may have. I've talked to many people in the past couple months who want to retire at 55, 57, right? And so you have to be willing to pay for your own healthcare. An HSA you can use. I would recommend doing research on a health savings account, or just setting aside money to cover any type of healthcare bridging that you have to do when you get to the point of retirement. If you have debt, especially that high interest debt, you're going to want to have a debt payoff plan, right? And have an understanding of when that debt will be paid off, especially high interest debt, because that can eat into your monthly expenses. And so you'll want to aim to have as little debt going into retirement as possible. If you have a mortgage going into your retirement, that's typically not a big issue, because while your mortgage can fluctuate, you will typically know that number of, the highest that you may have to pay. You also have options, to refinance and all of that when you get to retirement. So just consider that. Understand what you're going to do about housing. So are you going to stay where you are? You're going to downsize? You're going to relocate? Explore each of those options so you can understand how that's going to impact your cash flow in retirement. And then make sure your estate plans, i.e., your legacy documents, are current. Okay. So make sure that you get your estate plan reviewed at every life transition. So whether it's marriage, birth of children, divorce, disability, death, one of your children has issues, where they cannot care for themselves, you'll want to make sure that if you have any life transitions, that you are handling your estate plans appropriately. And so when we're thinking about all of the things that we just discussed, it's really in how the mindset is shifted, right? And the mindset shift behind the numbers is every tool that we talked about works better when it's paired with a shift of how decisions get made. So instead of being reactive, you'll want to start to build a muscle of proactivity. So that's going to be deciding on a schedule that you set and not when crisis is happening. Okay. From scarcity talk to being strategic. Instead of you saying, I can't afford something, you say, what would I need, right, to be able to actually be able to afford said thing. So it's really creating an opportunity for where you're taking that limit off of what you can do, and you're positioning yourself to be able to actually start to work towards whatever it is that you want, i.e., home ownership, a business, right? And then from isolation to community. So money decisions with trusted voices and not being carried alone. You don't have to do this by yourself. I have a Mind and Money group on Facebook. I'm getting ready to launch another resource for people who want to be in community and understand their money and really just have support around their money, right? But you'll want to make sure that you are not trying to do this in isolation because there's nothing to be built in isolation. What it does is cap you, right? If you don't have the knowledge and you're not getting the knowledge, where do you think you're going to get it from? Right. And so that's where that community factor comes into play. So for being proactive, strategic, and community focused is how you really get that mindset shift behind the numbers that we talked about. So you got some homework. I know you didn't sign up for this, but you showed up anyway. So your 90-day action plan. Here are some small sequence things that you can do, not all at once, but wherever you find yourself here, you know, that's where you start. So your very first goal is to move from survival to stabilization. Okay. You're going to write down every income source and debt. Okay. So that you get a full picture. You're going to open or fund a starter emergency account. Okay. And or automate one recurring bill. It can be something real small, like a cable bill. Okay. Something that's not going to throw your account into complete disarray. But again, we're working on stabilization. We're working on building those habits. That's your first 30 days. The second 30 days, the 30 days, 31 to 60, is you're going to be strengthening those muscles. So you're going to request a pay review or market research, or you're going to be looking for another job, okay, that pays you more money. You're never stuck. I really want you to understand. Take a risk, leave, go work somewhere that pays you more money. Confirm full employer retirement match is captured. Okay. And then review your insurance coverage gaps. Work with an insurance agent. They do not charge you a thing to have a conversation. So I suggest you be willing to have a conversation with them. There are resources out there for that. And then from day 61 to 90, you're going to scale this. And so you're going to automate one investment or extra debt payment. How do you do that? By stabilizing, understanding where your debt is, right? Understanding what your debt is, or understanding, what your goals are for the emergency starter account, or, if you're at the point where you are ready to invest, automate it, okay? Update your will or establish a will or update your will and beneficiaries, and then identify at least one income stream to test, okay? So that's your 90-day action plan. And with this, I can pretty much assure you, you'll find yourself feeling more confident, even if you don't see the actual changes happening. Again, what we're trying to do is just build sustainable habits for you so that you can start to see your money growing on that upper side of the K curve. So this work is not to be done in isolation, okay? So what you will do is you will tell at least one person your 90-day plan. You will talk to either the community group or an advisor, right? That could be joining my Facebook group, Mind and Money. Um, joining a local group that even your book club, right? Y'all can talk about money in book club, or talking to an advisor like an insurance agent or, a financial coach or someone that can help you, right? And then do a check-in date that you'll put on your calendar for you to do a check-in and see how you're doing. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, but put enough pressure on yourself where you're actually in the process of seeing the work being done, okay? So the Mind and Money method here is your mindset and your numbers are not opposite. They work together. So you need to work on clearing your mind with intention and peace. Plan with clear eyes and real numbers and prosper. Really like prosperity over time will be a natural consequence. Trust me. So you're already moving in the right direction. You've seen everything you need to do. So all you need to do is start to move in the right direction. Okay. That's not a final destination. Everybody talks about, oh, I want to be a millionaire. And it's like, great, but that's not even final destination because once you do that, you have to sustain it. Right. And so every dollar that's automated, everything that's renegotiated, every document put in order is working towards putting you towards the upside of the K curve. So keep going. All right, so you have a 90-day written plan attached to this. You understand what the K-shaped framework is and how you can use it for future decisions. Make one accountability connection and then contact us for follow-up coaching and resources if you need it. In addition to that, if you know of an organization, ERG, or team that is looking for financial wellness resources, please mention Mind and Money. We are happy to be a part of community building, closing this wealth gap as a community and focusing on economic development and financial resilience for everybody. So thank you so much for your time. I'm Yolanda Gardner, founder and principal consultant of Mind and Money, and I hope to see you again soon.